What up guys, it's Munya and welcome back to elevate-psych. Today I'll be helping you tackle the long answer exam questions of A-level psychology. In this episode we will be throwing back to the previous episodes on MCQs and short answer questions. So if you haven't watched them, go and check them out now. With that being said, essay questions aren't actually as daunting as they first seem, because all they are is simple parts brought together as a cohesive whole. So to illustrate this, in my mind, a good psychology essay will have three important elements. Specifically, those elements are a definition of key terms, which is something we covered in the MCQ episode, applying those definitions to specific contexts, which we covered in the short answer section, and one more crucial element which we'll discuss now. The examiner's report tells us what these three elements are. Have a look at this previous exam. Discuss the influence of childhood on adult relationships for 16 marks. Firstly, the examiner's report states, most students use Bowlby's work as a basis, but there was significant variation in the detail and understanding of the internal working model. This reinforces element one of a successful essay, key definitions and concepts. We then see that at the top end, the implications of research into childhood experience and adult relationships were explored. This is in line with element two of a successful essay, application. Top students will take information and bend it to a context or implement it into a real-world setting, thus accessing the top marks. So now we get into that third and final element, and here's what the examiner's report says. Better answers commented on the inconsistencies in the data, whilst the mark scheme states methodological evaluation of studies would be another rich source of AO2 and AO3 credit. So let's start to talk about this third element, and we can think of it as being in two halves. The first being scientific criticism. You might have never heard of the term and you might not know what it means. So very quickly, let's discuss why this is necessary to gain the top marks on an A-level psychology essay. Now, a bit of background for you. Psychology was never in the cool gang when it came to science. Whilst other sciences dazzled the world with chemical equations and laws of physics and fancy lab experiments, psychology sat in the corner talking about emotions and feelings, and therefore it was never really seen as a real science. Considering the fact that psychologists were still dedicating their lives to this, it wasn't a criticism they took lightly, and so they began a movement to make psychology more scientific. Fundamentally, that means two things: conducting experiments and criticizing those experiments, because that is exactly how science works. Having an idea, testing that idea, and then putting that idea through an inferno of criticism. Therefore, if psychology research isn't being criticized, it doesn't count as a science, and that's why it's so important to acknowledge this in your essays. Remember, the key word here is scientific criticism, not just criticism. If you think that Freud's beard made him look like a pretentious hipster who probably sits in the corner sipping chai tea from a vegan-friendly thermal flask, it is a strong point, but it probably won't count for any marks. We're talking about the specific scientific elements of an experiment. How was it designed? Was it repeated or independent measures? Who were the participants? Where were they from? What were their demographics? What were the independent variables and the dependent variables? What about the behavior of the researcher? Could that have influenced the result? Demand characteristics? Do the findings in the laboratory have any application to the outside world? Ecological validity? By talking about all of these things, we make psychology scientific and we allow it to continue on as a science. The second half of the third element is issues and debates. Now, what's important to consider is that although all psychologists are working together to make psychology a science, it doesn't necessarily mean they agree with each other. And those rifts in opinion have led to debates such as nature versus nurture or free will versus determinism, all differences in opinion with opposing sides. Here are some of the issues and debates that I used when I was doing my A-level in psychology. Firstly, gender and culture bias. Remember, psychology is supposed to be something we all have. In other words, it's supposed to apply across the world to every person. However, most psychological research takes place in shiny, expensive American laboratories with middle-class white males. Any research that does this and then attempts to apply those results to women can be criticized as being androcentric. Or if you attempt to apply it to different cultures, you can accuse it of being ethnocentric. So an argument we can always fall back on in an essay is, if a study attempts to explain human behavior, how far does it go in covering every demographic? Gender, religion, race, swag. Secondly, we've got the free will versus determinism debate. Is all human behavior chosen, or is it a product of external forces? So in a situation where it seems that participants are choosing the behavior, we can chime in with the determinism debate. Are there external factors which are actually exerting a force on the way they're acting? Or in a situation where it seems that participants are being made to behave a certain way by external factors, we can raise the point that all humans have free will and actively choose to make certain decisions. This ties in nicely with the third debate, nature versus nurture, which again pitches internal factors such as genetics against external factors such as the environment. Even better, this relates to the fourth debate, reductionism versus holism. The problem with biological approaches is that they attempt to reduce even the most baffling complex human behavior down to one or two small genes. It just doesn't make sense. In contrast, behavioral or nurture-based approaches, on the other hand, introduce a wide range of factors such as social and cognitive, making them seem more holistic. But then the argument swings again because biology is objective, while social and environmental factors may be down to interpretation. And finally, the ethics debate. When we conduct research, how well do we consider the morality of it? If we found that a particular social group were correlated to a negative behavior, what would be the implications of releasing this information out to the public? Psychologists have a lot of power, and we can always question how and whether this should be used. For now, I've been Munya.